Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. We are very pleased to host a vital and timely discussion today about Mexican investment in the United States with a group of some of the most influential voices from Mexican companies. I'd like to welcome our moderator for the day, Luis Alberto Moreno, Managing Director, Allen and Company, Juan Pablo de Valle, Chairman of the Board of Orbia, Daniel Servitje, Executive Chair, Grupo Bimbo, Arturo Gutiérrez Hernández, Chief Executive Officer, Arca Continental, Fernando Villanueva, CEO of DEACERO, USA, as well as Luis de la Calle, CEO and founding partner de la Calle Madrazo Mancera, who will give us some background in the opening remarks. To close the panel, Marcelo Ebrard, Secretary of the Economy, will join us later at the end of the panel. The origin of this panel is to talk about the unobvious, which is the depth and breadth of Mexican investments in the United States. This is a critical link that is not often discussed. We hear from many leading business people from around the world, but we rarely have an opportunity to listen to Mexican business leaders talk about their investments and the potential future investments in the United States. A portion of those future investments, a major portion, are built on the deep relationship between the United States and Mexico and the integration of the two economies. It is not only the integration of the products that we hear most about, from automotive components manufactured in Mexico, powering Michigan assembly lines to Mexican-owned manufacturing facilities, employing thousands across the U.S. heartland, Mexican steel strengthening American infrastructure, and Mexican agricultural products stocking grocery shelves nationwide. It is much broader and critical to growth and competitiveness in the United States, Mexico, and Canada. You will hear today about the thousands of jobs created by this investment across the U.S. and from coast to coast, north to south. We believed in the continued importance of this cross-border partnership for the prosperity of both nations and the competitiveness of North America. As a reminder, this conversation is on the record and a video will be available on demand. A special thanks to our Mexico series sponsor, MetLife. I now would like to introduce Luis de la Calle, who will open the discussion. Luis.
Well, thank you, Susan, for that very kind introduction, and I'm glad to be here with you today and talk about this very important topic, as you mentioned. Mexico, the US, and Canada have a degree of economic integration that is significantly deeper than what people think. And generally, most people would conceive the process of integration in North America as making Mexico more attractive for direct foreign investment, establishing rules on the Mexican market so that Mexico would host more investment for growth, for joint production, and for have a thriving market. But few people realize that the degree of integration between Mexico, the US, and Canada in the last 30 years, and more so today, is a two-way street on everything. On goods, Mexico is now the largest supplier in the world to the US. We are the second largest market of the US in the world for goods. Mexico is going to become the largest market for the US in a few years, second only to Canada today. It is also true on services. Mexico has a very intense services relationship with the US across the board, from financial services to transportation services to medical tourism to education and professional services of all kinds. Tourism, of course. Mexico is the country to which more Americans go. Mexico is also the largest country in the world where Americans migrate and live the year round or for half of the year when it's cold in the US. And surprisingly for many people, Mexico is also has become a large investor in the US market. We witnessed yesterday, a historic day in terms of international trade. I mean, President Trump made a very significant announcement of a major shift on international trade policy by the US. And the most striking feature of the announcement yesterday is that contrary to what many people were expecting, Mexico and Canada were not in the list that President Trump announced for reciprocity duties. And the reason for that, beyond what governments might have done or companies might try to convince the US, the reason as to why Mexico and Canada were not in the list is that the absence of that list reflects the level of integration between Mexico, the US, and Canada on goods, on services, on people, and on investment. That is the real reason why Mexico and Canada were excluded. And Mexico has, of course, began from a very low base in terms of investment to the US. But in recent years, Mexico has been investing more in the US in proportion to the size of our economy than the US has been investing in Mexico. I like to show you, if I may, these concepts in few graphs. The first one is this idea that Mexico and the US co-produce and co-invest. President Trump has said in his speech yesterday and in the White House proclamation that he wants the US to become a production economy. Well, what he really meant is that he wants to be a co-production economy because the US today co-produces with Mexico and Canada. But at the same time that the US co-produces with Canada and Mexico, we also co-invest. There is significant Canadian investment in the US, but also there is so significant and growing investment coming from the Mexican side. Let me. Well, the first thing that I wanted to share with you is this: Mexico's manufacturing employment and US manufacturing employment are two parallel lines. We move together. When we create jobs on the Mexican side of the border in manufacturing, jobs are created in the US. When the US creates jobs on the US side on manufacturing, jobs are created in Mexico. These two lines have a 90% correlation index. And you can see that in the last 2 years, the number of jobs created in manufacturing have fallen in the US and in Mexico because the cycles go together, we move together. So it is not that Mexico displaces the US when investment happens in Mexico. It is not that the US displaces Mexico when investment happens in the US. What this means is that when we attract investment from outside the region, from Asia, from Europe, we tend to move together. And even though the plants open up in the US, Mexico will end up supplying that plant. And if the plant opens up in Mexico, the US will end up supplying that plant. The second idea I wanted to share with you is this one. This is what Donald Trump was trying to refer to yesterday. The US, this is the average import duties at WTL by different countries. On the horizontal axis, we have the apply rates. On the vertical axis, we have the bound rates, the maximum rates that you can raise the rates to. The US has here a very low MFN duty, 3.3%. That is the duty the US applies, and that is the maximum duty the US has committed itself to apply before WTL. Other countries, Brazil, South Korea, Vietnam, China, have much higher import duties, both applied and bound. Mexico, we have an applied duty of 7%, but the maximum duty we can apply of 35% in WTO. So what President Trump did yesterday was to move the US from this position up in northeast of this graph towards this level. I mean, we don't know exactly where this will end up, but I mean, the US is going to have higher MFN duties than it used to have. Mexico's preference under USMCA is this distance, 3.3% before yesterday, and now it's going to be somewhere around here. The question for Mexico is whether, two questions is, one, do we comply with the rule of origin? And two, how do we make sure that Mexico can comply with the rule of origin, because now it's more important to do so to truly take advantage of the preferential access that we get by paying zero duties. This is the duty by sector in 2024 for Mexican exports coming into the US. You can see in the second column that 91% of the automobiles exported from Mexico to the US pay zero duties under USMCA. This is auto parts right here. And every sector is, of course, the next one. This one here is electronics. In electronics, you can see that we have a 12% of the exports complying with the USMCA paying zero, but a good proportion in light blue are all the things that enter the US, pay zero duty under WTO. Well, those exports, this one here, in every single of the sectors, you can see the different proportions, now have an incentive to comply with the rule of origin so that they get the preferential access and pay zero duties. We calculate that Mexican exports to the US would comply with 85% of our exports would comply with the rule of origin and therefore can pay zero. And the 15% that do not comply, they need to make a special effort to make sure that they source within North America, be that in the US, be that in Canada or in Mexico, so that they comply going forward, because the incentive to comply with that rule of origin is now going to be 12%, because Mexico and Canada will be charged 12% for non-originating goods. Now, in terms of the markets, Mexico was, as I said at the beginning, the second largest market for the US in 2024. We bought 16.2% of worldwide US exports, and Canada 16.9%. And we supply the US with 15.5% of total US imports. So this is quite interesting, because it means that Mexico and Canada, we are larger as markets for the US than as suppliers to the US. And even though that's the case, we run a trade surplus, or the US runs a trade surplus vis-a-vis Mexico and Canada. But to truly calculate the size of the deficit the US runs with Canada and Mexico, we will need to correct these numbers by the level of integration we have in our economies, and therefore take into account that Mexico is a large market for the US, and therefore the trade deficit has to be corrected by exports from the US. So when you do that, you get this graph. Mexico is the 43rd country that has the lowest deficit with the US, or the US has a deficit with Mexico, once you take into account the exports of the US to Mexico, and Canada is even lower down here. All other countries above Mexico have trade deficits larger than the one Mexico has, proportional to the market that Mexico and Canada represent vis-a-vis the US. Said differently, this is the 45-degree line here. This is US exports and US imports. Mexico and Canada are the only two countries in the world that diminish the average trade deficit of the US, because we are above the 45% degree line. Let me just finish with the investment numbers. These are official numbers from Mexico's Ministry of the Economy and from the Commerce Department as to U.S. investment in Mexico and Mexican investment in the U.S. This is only the equity component. It's not the total assets of the company, it's only the equity component. The debt component of this investment is not registered as foreign direct investment. Here you can see that in the last years, the U.S. has invested in Mexico roughly between 10 to $20 billion per year. Now, it varies among the years, but I mean, in the year 2022, investment was close to 20 billion. In 2024, 16 billion, so forth. And the red bars is how much Mexico has invested in the U.S. And you can see that in the last 4 years, we have invested north of $5 billion per year, no? On this in the red bars. What is interesting is that the U.S. economy is 20 times the size of the Mexican economy, but U.S. investment into Mexico is only 3 times. Why? Because Mexico is investing in the U.S. in a proportion higher than our market share, if you wish, in terms of the ability of Mexico to generate resources in terms of the size of GDP. If we see this same graph, but cumulative from 2011 to 2024, we will get this. The U.S. has invested in Mexico $188 billion, and Mexico has invested in the U.S. in the last 13 years, $38 billion. I mean, of course, Mexico having very little investment before, and now we have a cumulative of $38 billion in the U.S. of registered investment before the Commerce Department. This does not necessarily include all the investment that happens across the U.S. by Mexican citizens that live in the U.S. or invest in the U.S. but are not registered in the registry before the U.S. Commerce Department. Now, how do we look compared to other countries? Well, compared to other countries, this is foreign direct investment coming into the U.S. from the world in 2024, according to Commerce Department. The European Union was the largest with $119 billion. And Mexico invested 5.5 billion. So Mexico looks relatively small compared to the EU, to Japan, to the UK, Canada, Germany, France. I mean, these are wealthy countries that are exporters of capital to the world. But if you compare Mexico against economies similar to ours, in size or in levels of development, you will see that Mexico invested last year more than Singapore, twice as much as Italy, 3 times China, 3 times India, 10 times Taiwan, and 20 times Brazil for 2024. So with this introduction, Susan, what I wanted to convey is that Mexico has a co-production integration with the U.S., which is quite deep. And we are beginning to have also a co-investment integration in the U.S. that is much deeper than people give credit to. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. That was an amazing information as background for this panel. And I am now turning it over to Luis Alberto to moderate his wonderful panel.
Well, thank you very much, Susan. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you, Luis, for an excellent presentation. You know, when one looks at Mexico and its relationship with the U.S., it's not only all the things that Luis talked about in terms of services, manufacturing, the deep integration and people, but it's the quality of entrepreneurs that over this long journey since the first free trade agreement that has made Mexican entrepreneurs world-class. And this is, I think, what we're going to see today with the set of entrepreneurs who are chairmen or CEOs of the different companies, which sit in different parts of the production sector and in different areas. So let me start with Juan Pablo del Valle, a good friend who I've known for some time. And what I would like to do with all of them is the following. First, describe a little bit what your company does. And then more importantly, talk a little bit about the investments that you have in the United States, where in the United States, and this is the other area that is fascinating, is the dispersity, the numbers of states that are home to U.S. To Mexican foreign direct investment, the time you have been there, and more importantly, and something everybody of course looks at, is what does it all mean in terms of jobs? So over to you, Juan Pablo.
Thank you so much, Luis Alberto. Thank you, Susan and Ascoa, for organizing this fantastic panel. I'll tell you a little bit about Orbia. Orbia is a Mexican company with presence in 50 countries. We sell to more than 100 countries, 23,000 employees, $7 billion in sales, and we participate in different sectors. In the petrochemical sector with plastics. We do chemicals in the refrigerants industry, and we're significantly investing in molecules for lithium-ion batteries. We're also in the telecommunications space through conduit that protects fiber optic cable, mainly in the US. But turning to what do we do, Luis Alberto, in the US, it is around 30% of our business. We have more than 2,400 employees in 14 states, and we participate in the plastics, chemicals, and telecommunications business. We are in Georgia, in Illinois, in Ohio, Massachusetts, Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas, Utah, Wyoming. I won't mention the 14, but we're all over the place. Our assets are worth more than $3 billion, some of which we have invested and grown organically. Others, we've made acquisitions. We believe that North America represents the most relevant opportunity for us. We have invested in the past in a very significant way. As I said, our assets are worth around $3 billion, and we pretend to continue to do that. But I'll leave it at that to allow the other participants to explain about their business.
Thank you very much, Juan Pablo. So now let's turn it over to Daniel Servitje, somebody I've had also the privilege of knowing for a number of years, who's built an incredible company where many people don't know how many of his products they pick, not only in the United States, but in Canada and all over the Americas, in Asia. It's a truly global company coming from Mexico. And so over to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Luis Alberto. And it's great to be here in this panel. Our story as a company is it's a long one. We are celebrating this year the 80th anniversary of Grupo Bimbo. We're also a Mexican-based company. We now have presence in 35 countries all around the world. We have basically a large percentage of our sales coming out of what we refer nowadays the North American treaty. If we account for those three countries, we're close to 79% of our revenues are coming from these three countries. And if we exclude Mexico, 46% of our revenues are from the US and Canada. So for us, the number one country in terms of revenues is the USA, where we have operations basically almost in all states. We have 60 bakeries in the US and 720 sales centers in 700 plus communities all around the US. We have presence in 48 out of the 50 states. And our operations are run basically by Americans. We have been acquiring companies since 1997, although we started growing organically in the late 80s. I actually finished my MBA from California University, and from that glamour place, I went to basically open routes as a sales supervisor in the Hispanic districts of Los Angeles, and from there we have been since then, basically growing both organically and inorganically. And we have, over the years, invested close to $10 billion in the USA. Our brands are very well known to consumers. We have, as Luis Alberto was saying, brands that are US centered, such as Sara Lee, Thomas, English muffins and bagels, the sweet side of the bread, of the baking industry with Entenmann's, and Arnold bread and many others. In terms of the Mexican brands, which are now very much acculturated in the US, Bimbo bread is the most important one. Marinela snack cakes and cookies is also very important. And one that it's growing by leaps and bounds in the US and worldwide is our Takis salted snack brand. So this is just a glimpse of what we do and where we are. And I'll pass it to you, Luis Alberto.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Now I'd like to turn it over to Arturo Gutiérrez. He's the CEO of Arca, as we know, and one of the largest Coca-Cola bottlers in the world, operating not only in the US, but also across Latin America. And the same questions to you, Arturo, such that we can begin to, for everybody's purpose, understand where the different companies are and where they're going.
Thank you, Luis Alberto. Yeah, well, effectively, we are one of the Coca-Cola bottlers, one of the most important in the world. We have a long history. We date back to 1926 as the first franchise for Coca-Cola in Mexico. We're going to celebrate our 100th anniversary. Actually, the company is older than that. We started with a brand that's called Topo Chico, and now it's a very well-known brand in the United States. And that's our origin here in Monterrey. We have grown to serve more than 128 million consumers in 5 countries: Mexico, Ecuador, Peru, Argentina, and the United States. In 2012, we entered the US market first with a snacks business in Pennsylvania, and in 2017, with an investment in the beverage space, acquiring a Coca-Cola operation in Texas, Oklahoma, and parts of Arkansas and New Mexico. And it's interesting to have a Mexican company operating such an iconic American brand in the United States. We're actually the only Latin American bottler operating in that market. We are one of the largest Coca-Cola operations in the United States, serving around 31 million consumers in those states. And we also operate in northern Mexico, all the northern states of Mexico. So we're very well positioned to capitalize on the economic development of both sides of the border. In the US, we have 9,800 associates operating in beverages, 7 production plants, 1 additional plant in snacks, 37 distribution facilities. And our business has a very close connection with the community, since we serve thousands of points of sale every day in our markets. Our snacks business is based in Pennsylvania. We operate mostly in the Northeast, in Metro New York, and the Northeastern United States and the East Coast. Since 2017, we have invested approximately $1.2 billion in the United States to improve our production and distribution footprint. We invested in a production facility in Houston, Texas, the only plant that the Coca-Cola system has built in the United States in the last 15 years. So we have a strong commitment to the US market. And we also invest in community programs and efforts supporting local communities through a number of partnerships. For this year, we plan to continue to invest in every market. Our total investment is around $900 million of CapEx investment. Of that, about 25%, approximately $225 million, will be in the United States to expand production and distribution capacity, digital transformation projects, introducing new beverages, and also environmental projects. So that's a brief description of who we are.
Thank you very much, Arturo. Now let me turn it over to Fernando Villanueva from DEACERO, and the same question, where where do you see not only the opportunities, the history of your company, but more importantly, kind of the set of investments and where you operate in the US? I know you're right now in Houston, so you can see where his interests are. So over to you, Fernando.
Thank you so much, Luis. Thank you so much. And thank you for the Council of Americas for inviting me. And I feel honored. And I will start talking a little bit about the history of my company, DEACERO. We started 73 years ago based in Monterrey. Our founder, Don Cesar Gutiérrez, he started like with a really true North American mindset. Why? Because he started buying steel wire from the United States, from Illinois, and bring that wire to Mexico and produce wire fences in Mexico. Okay, so today, after more than 73 years, DEACERO is one of the leaders of producing long steel products. Okay, including wire and wire products, with manufacturing operations both in Mexico and United States, and of course with a very strong commitment to sustainability, to our people, our communities on both countries. Okay. Again, just like our founder did, we right now operate with this binational mindset. Why binational mindset? Because we source steel scrap, natural gas, electricity, and other manufacturing goods to the United States. We produce more than 9,000 different steel products, okay, from one nail to wires that they go to the auto industry, okay? So we serve different industries like construction, manufacturing, agriculture, especially here in Texas. And one of the things that distinguishes DEACERO from other steel producers is that we do not source any of our main inputs from other countries other than Mexico and US, okay? So our steel, it's probably 100% truly North American steel. So both in Mexico and United States, we have more than 60 facilities. We have three types of facilities. We have recycling facilities. We are the biggest recycler in Mexico of steel scrap. We melt and pour that steel. We manufacture finished goods out of that steel, okay? And of course, we do the distribution of our steel products across the US and Mexico. We have manufacturing operations in Texas and Missouri. We have recycling operations in California and Texas. And also we have distribution operations in Texas, California, Arizona, Chicago, more than 9-10 states of the US. One of the things also that we feel very proud is that our steel is one of the cleanest steels in the world. Our steel only have emissions of 0.37 tons of CO2, okay, compared to 1.88, that is the average of the world, and even lower than the average of the US, that is 0.46. So in a nutshell, DEACERO started with very small investments in the 80s, okay, but more strongly, we started doing investments in the 2000s, okay? Again, with doing investments in the three types of facilities that we own: recycling, manufacturing, and distribution. We employ more than 6,500 people in our company, and in the US, we employ more than 1,000 people, I'm sorry. And more than that, direct 1,000 people is more the indirect jobs that we provide to all of the services that we use in our manufacturing, recycling, and distribution facilities. We have invested in the US from the year 2000 up to date, more than $250 million. And we are with plans of investing $100 million more, both in Texas, in our manufacturing and distribution facilities in Texas and Arizona.
I want to follow up on what Fernando was saying about investment. And, you know, capital allocation is everything for any company. And how you think of capital allocation, where do you think, looking at the next 5 years, where your companies are going to be in terms of investments in the U.S.? Where are they going to be? What they mean in terms of employments? We saw from what Luis presented, essentially, that there had been a steady investment cycle of about $5 billion a year. So how do you size that up, and how are you looking at it, Juan Pablo?
Thank you, Luis Alberto. At the end of the day, there's opportunity where there is a market. And as Luis de la Calle explained, the North American market is a very, very big market, Canada, Mexico, and the US. We're planning to invest in the next years around $1.5 billion in two specific molecules for lithium-ion batteries, where the integration between Mexico and the US is unparalleled. We have a mineral called fluorspar, which we have an advantage of being the world's largest producer with the lowest extraction cost, and being the most reliable partner to all of the users in the US. We do much more than sell rocks. We invest in developing petrochemicals and molecules. And what we're doing, and I don't want to get too technical, is to invest with our partner, ScienceCo, in a molecule called PVDF, which is an important part of the cathode in the batteries. And ourselves, independently, we will invest in producing LiPF6. This is in a new plant in Louisiana, another one in Georgia. And we plan to do this in the next years because there is a fantastic opportunity, and because we have an advantage given the integration. So I think what's happening with these new orders that President Trump announced yesterday will definitely is creating noise, but at the end, this will settle. Reality will become clear, and what makes sense will happen. The only things that make sense is that there is opportunity to invest. There is a fantastic market. We can be more competitive than any region in the world. And these investments from us and other companies, mostly in Mexico, will continue to happen. And we will continue, as Luis explained, to punch above our weight as Mexican investment.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Juan Pablo. I'd like to turn it over now to Daniel, who is essentially in a business that you continuously have to invest in to remain competitive, especially building brands the way you've done so. Over to you, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you, Luis Alberto. The company has been built due to reinvestment and growth, and year after year, we have been basically a long-term thinker and investor, and that's the way we create value for our shareholders by really getting us in a sustainable manner, investing and building our business in the US, in Mexico, and elsewhere. At this point in time, what we have been seeing in the past, I would say 5-6 months, is a lot of uncertainty. A lot of uncertainty of what are going to be at the end of the days the rules of the game, the final landscape, and at this time we're basically finalizing the investments that we had decided before. We continue to make any necessary investments needed to keep our business strong and steady. But we're holding off major decisions in Mexico, in the US, and to be frank, in many parts of the world until the dust settles. We have a lot of faith in our business and our business model, and we are sure that this is going to be a temporary hiccup. And let me tell you that our business is local. Fundamentally, bread cannot travel thousands of miles. So most of our business in the U.S. is supplied by local suppliers and baked in the different communities. We're the largest Mexican employer in the U.S. We have more than 23,000 associates and independent business owners who work for us, and I'm sure that the plans will resume and will strengthen as after these issues around the global trade get more clear.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I'd like to now turn it over to Arturo with the same question.
Yeah, well, the U.S. and Mexico are our biggest markets, so we still have a commitment to pursue growth in those markets. We provided guidance to our investors, and we believe they will continue to grow in the products that we sell. We know that growth is not going to be a straight line, though. But if we have this long-term perspective, and considering how dynamic is the Texas market, particularly in the United States, that has had higher growth than the average in the U.S. in the last 7 or 8 years, we're still committed to those projects. 2025 is a year in which our ratio of investment, of CapEx investment to revenue, is going to be among the highest in the last 10 years, probably the highest in the last 10 years in our operation. And as I said, a big portion of that investment will be destined to the U.S. market. One of the most important projects in the U.S., this is a multi-year project, is the expansion of our facilities in Texas, adding new production lines in our Fort Worth plant and San Antonio plants. We recently, just last month, opened a new distribution facility in Waco, Texas, as well. So those are investments with this long-term perspective, and we, are convinced about the benefits of this integration that Luis mentioned initially, and we believe that we are very well positioned to capitalize on favorable economic and trends on both sides of the border going forward.
Great. Thank you very much, Arturo. I'd like to now turn it again to Fernando for the same question.
Thank you, Luis. We're standing in a quite different position than other industries. Why? Because the steel industry, the Mexican steel industry, it's under a 25% tariff, okay, since March the 2nd, okay? So even though our investment is going to be applied, our current investment, there's a lot of uncertainty, just like Daniel said. And I want to explain you what we are living in the steel industry, and that's the reasons why there's so much uncertainty on how to allocate our investments. So we are the biggest steel nail manufacturer in the U.S. Okay, our facility in Missouri, in Poplar Bluff, Missouri, it's the biggest. We are the biggest producer in the whole the U.S. But nevertheless, our market share is really small. Why? Because there's an overcapacity of steel production, basically from China. Okay, and China and Chinese exports are distorting the steel market. I'm going to give you a little bit of facts on why we have the uncertainty of our markets. The global steel production in 2024 was about 1,900 million tons of steel. Out of those, 53% were manufactured in China. And on top of that, there's an overcapacity of 600 million tons of steel. Okay, so Chinese state companies are distorting the market. Okay, and I fully understand why the United States are taking the actions that they're taking against China and some other countries that act as satellites of Chinese steel. But I think we need more certainty to keep on doing the investments to create jobs. Let me tell you the difference about the job creations that we have in the U.S. compared to the Mexican investments. In the Mexican operation, we have the steel manufacturing, okay? To produce 1 ton of steel, we need 1/10 of the amount of jobs to produce the same ton of nails, okay? So we're basically sending the downstream production to United States and create jobs here. But with all these situations in the world and around the steel, we are right now undecided on how to move forward. And I really think, just the same Daniel said, we need to wait and see where the dust settles and decide from there. But currently, the steel situation in the United States and in Mexico, it's uncertain.
Thank you, Fernando. I'd like to double click on something you just mentioned, and then I can start the round with Juan Pablo. And it's this notion that Luis talked about, of the notion that what you really have between the US and Mexico is a co-production type of arrangement in which you get economies of scale and economies of scope. I'd love to hear from all of you. How do you see that? Because as I listen to all of you, it's clear that there is a combination of economies of scope that you reach precisely by having that interconnection. And were it not to be there, it would, at the end of the day, affect your consumers both here and in Mexico.
Oh, absolutely. We have assets that if we isolate them, their value is close to zero. If we combine them, you multiply the value by a big multiple. And I'll give you 2 examples. The US is one of the most competitive producers of ethane gas, which is then converted through crackers into ethylene. We own, with our partner Oxy, a cracker, 1 million ton cracker in Ingleside, Texas. That ethylene that is produced in that cracker goes to produce another molecule called vinyl monomer that is then sent to Mexico, where in Altamira, in our plants, and in Colombia, we convert that monomer into PVC. It's thanks to that integration and to that very competitive gas in the US that is manufactured by fantastic companies with incredible employees, that we can be competitive around the world with PVC resin, pipes, and fittings, and all of the integration. Another example is the reverse. The equivalent of the very competitive gas that the US has, we have in one mineral called fluorspar. We convert, in San Luis Potosí, we have a fantastic mine where we extract the fluorspar, then convert it into hydrofluoric acid and Matamoros, and then send it to Louisiana and to many other parts in the US to manufacture molecules that are incredibly relevant for everyday use in the United States. One example I would give you is a chemical called aluminum fluoride. Without it, you couldn't produce aluminum. It's 0.5% of the cost, but it's just because of that catalyzer that bauxite can turn into aluminum. We have products like that that go into lithium-ion batteries, into semiconductors, into solar panels, but it is because of this integration. If the US didn't have that very competitive gas, we wouldn't be able to be competitive in Mexico, Colombia with our resin. If we didn't have that fluorspar in Mexico, we wouldn't be able to grow in the downstream businesses that we're in Louisiana, in Georgia, in Missouri, in Oklahoma, in all of these spaces. It is because of this very competitive element, and it is because of this integration. Just to summarize, and as I was discussing with Susan, this is much more than a trade relationship. This is a capital relationship that has to do much more with the balance sheet. Our assets together are worth much more than isolated.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to turn it over for the same question to Daniel, even though, as he well explained, his business is fundamentally local. but there's a lot of learnings across the Bimbo system in terms of distribution, MPS scores, all of the things that you learn across
No, no,
working
no.
a consumer type of product.
Luis Alberto, make no mistake. The bread is bred locally, but the company is a global one, and we try to take advantage of our scale and the uniqueness of the different sort of categories that we bake. And some of these products are baked in Mexico for the U.S. market, and that allows us to have a better price and a better cost than if we only could produce it and sell it in one market, definitely. And we're large importers of U.S. Products. Wheat, for example, requires a protein that you need to basically plant it in areas where there's going to be a cold weather. So Mexico is not prone to basically to produce good bread, good wheat for bread production. So we import most of the wheat from the U.S. or sometimes from Canada or other countries, but it has been consistent our purchasing of U.S. wheat, and we might be probably the largest wheat imported in Mexico for our own use. So the relationship is two ways, and certainly I believe that was our understanding and our idea as we decided to get deeper into the U.S. Because we saw that the markets could benefit from taking advantage of the benefits of scale and learnings and synergies of the two countries. We still believe that that's going to be the case, and we're operating under that thinking. The relationship of the two countries has been strengthened and improved in other matters by this economic tie that we have between the industries of both countries.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Like to hear now from Arturo.
Yeah, Luis Alberto. Well, yeah, similar. We are mostly a local operated business. We mostly have local sourcing, but certainly aside from having a partnership with a U.S. company in our beverage business, we do have also some trade between the two countries for very strategic and key ingredients mostly, and we've benefited from that bilateral trade. The most important ones are fructose sweetener coming from the U.S. to Mexico. That has become more and more relevant for our operation, and some other key inputs like CO2 gas. It's also we're buying from the U.S. We sell some products to our own operations in the U.S. from Mexico. Some specialty products like the Mexican Coke that you find out in the U.S., Topo Chico, and some canned products. But there are other examples of this integration and how we've taken advantage of the possibility of integrating further our operations. And this is in our circular economy for plastic initiatives. We collect in the U.S. Used bottles, which is basically waste of very low quality that for technical reasons cannot be processed in the U.S. We ship it back to Mexico, and we recycle that at our Toluca plant in Mexico, and which is the largest food grade recycling facility for PET plastic in the world. And we ship that back to the United States to be used in our products, in our plastic packaging, so that those products have a high content of recycled product. In some cases, 100% recycled. So this creates a very interesting cycle that has a very positive also environmental impact. So I think that's a great example of how we've been able to integrate our operations in many, many ways.
Thank you so much, Arturo. And let me now turn it over to Fernando.
Thank you. No, we are, like I said, we were born and we still are a binational food company, that we are interconnected. And I'm gonna give you two examples, okay? One example is that we have recycling centers, as I already told you, where we collect the steel scrap, process it, and send it back to our steel mills in Mexico, where we have the scale, we have the technology to be competitive against any steel mill in the world, playing under the same rules, okay? But this same steel that we produce, okay, returns to the US as a finished product and also as a raw material that we use in our local manufacturing facilities to produce downstream value-added products, okay? So if we consider the amount of steel, okay, raw materials that we send from United States to Mexico and compare that amount to the same product that we send back to the US, we can affirm that all the steel products that we sell in the US has 100% US content. I'm going to give you another example of Missouri and our nail plant. Back in 2012, when we bought that company, the company was on the brink of going bankrupt. And the reason why is because of imports, okay? So if you compare the price of steel in the United States, in Mexico against China, Chinese steel is half of the price of the North American price of steel. So how these binational footprint worked to maintain the nail industry in the US by using the scrap from the US, manufacturing the steel in Mexico, and send it back to Missouri to manufacture nails. And that's the way we saved the nail industry in the US, okay? Honestly, when I arrived to the factory, the workers were shell-shocked, meaning afraid that we were going to close the facility and take it back to Mexico, but we did the opposite, okay? We keep investing, we saved a lot of jobs, and we still are the biggest nail manufacturer in the US, thanks to the binational, okay, footprint, where we, as countries, we complement each other against the real competitor, those countries that they don't play under the rules.
I love to ask a question of Luis de la Calle, because we've heard here a number of things. First of all, the enormous integration that exists, that is a win-win for all of the companies that we've just heard from. It is their competitiveness and their capital allocation, both in Mexico and the US, that is a win-win. At the same time, there is a level of uncertainty that essentially is making them kind of observe where everything comes together. And then you have what was announced yesterday, or actually some more than that, actually more like a week ago, where essentially the focus is on the duties on the automobile sector, where, as you correct me, Luis, you're the expert, but it's roughly 50% US content in whatever is made in the 4 million cars that are either produced in Mexico or in Canada. But with the effects that we start to see today, a revaluation of some of the currencies around the world, the effects that you see going forward in the industry, and how, with the early signs that you're seeing, you think that Mexico can adjust to this new reality, and more importantly, the industry as a whole?
Well, I mean, it is a little early to tell the impact that the announcements that made yesterday by President Trump will have on the economy. Markets did not like what they saw yesterday. We saw that this morning in New York, with the stock markets going down, and we also saw bond prices going up, anticipating a slowdown. For Mexico, the antidote to a potential slowdown in the US is to become more attractive for investment, and to take advantage of the increase relative preferential access we have in the US market now. The key for Mexico to take advantage of the new trade policy run by the US, I mean, the US is sort of trying to do a fortress North America, of which Mexico and Canada are involuntary partners. The key for Mexico is, in my view, making sure that we have enough industrial capacity in Mexico to better comply with the rules of origin, because the rules of origin now have become much more valuable than they were before the US increased its duties vis-a-vis the rest of the world. So in two cases, in the case of slowdown, and in the case of wanting to take advantage of the new preferential access Mexico, relative preferential access Mexico has to the US, the key is to have a Mexico that is more attractive to invest so that we can vertically integrate more and we can grow more, even though the US might have a relatively slowdown.
Thank you so much, Luis. And thank you to both Juan Pablo, to Daniel, to Arturo, and to Fernando for really great comments. And now, as they say in English, the cleanup battery is my good friend, the Secretary Marcelo Ebrard, to really put into perspective, you know, I know you've been very busy. You've, as always, exceed yourself, and cannot imagine when you tell the story of all the things that you've been back and forth. But perhaps before I turn it over to you, Susan.
Well, I just want to thank you, Luis, Alberto, and our panelists for an amazing panel. And I also want to welcome you, Secretary Ebrard, Marcelo. Muchas gracias por estar con nosotros esta tarde.
Thank you, Susan. Hello, everybody. Well, thank you for the invitation, and I think this is a great event. You have the presence of the Mexican companies and investments in the United States. Usually, we don't take into account the importance of these investments there and the trend that we can see in the past, let's say, 4 or 5 years. More than 200% of increase in the investment of Mexican investment in the United States. Okay, so congratulations about that, and thank you, Susan, for the event that you organized. I think that we need to maintain the issue and the narrative in the United States in the next months, especially. Well, let's see. I have obviously a more optimistic point of view about what's going on. At least we have our first and more important objective, which was to maintain and preserve the USMCA as a reference of the commerce and the regional investments and commerce. A reference point, important one. The risk several weeks ago was that we can have a situation without the USMCA. So right now, the main basement of the architecture of the commercial architecture between Mexico, United States, and Canada, and maybe with the other countries, is the USMCA. So this is the first point that I would like to make. Second, we have a mixture in the decisions between, zero tariffs on the USMCA, a part of USMCA without tariffs, and at the same time, and next weeks we are going to have a negotiation, especially in terms of car industry, auto parts, and steel and aluminum. So we are in the middle of this. It's a complex one, but we have the first step taken in a positive direction, I think. And at the end, we need to see what the economic repercussions are we going to see in the next weeks regarding the tariffs announced yesterday by President Trump. But this is a matter of concern, obviously, for everyone. There are a lot of speculation what's going to happen. What can happen in the next weeks. But anyway, as far as we have the USMCA's as reference points, as reference point of the commerce and investment in North America, we can manage the situation that we are going to face in the next weeks. That's why I started saying, well, we have a more optimistic point of view than maybe 2 weeks ago. We were really worried about the USMCA survival in this new protectionist atmosphere that we are seeing. So I would like to say that we need to reduce as most as we can, as far as we can, uncertainties and reduce tariffs on cars and steel and aluminum. This is the work to do the next 40 days. And then to try to organize or recover reflection and actions in order to increase competitiveness from North American region regarding other regions of the world. So I think that the first stage is to finish those negotiations, steel, aluminum, and cars, and then organize, as I mentioned, with the basement of the USMCA, a new stage of competitiveness of North America regarding other regions of the world. There are many, many, many opportunities that we are going to see. North America is going to be more and more important. Nevertheless, despite the narrative that we see every day in the morning, you see in the reciprocal tariffs the revival of the North American region. Anyway, even with the tariffs on cars and all that I mentioned. So let's continue this dialogue. Let's try to understand which opportunities are we going to have and to see for Mexico and the United States. And let's work very heavily with perseverance and cold blood in order to obtain those opportunities and fulfill our goals. So thank you very much again, everyone. Susan, congratulations for this initiative. And I think that there has been very important keynotes during the event, very important for the design of the next weeks from the Mexican point of view. So thank you very much, all of you, and Count and Economy Secretary, in order to support your efforts in the next weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcelo. And I want to thank again Luis de la Calle, Juan Pablo del Valle, Daniel Servitje, Arturo Gutiérrez, Fernando Villanueva, and of course, our wonderful moderator, Luis Alberto Moreno. Muchas gracias a todo. And I want to thank my amazing team, Randy and Adan and Luis and Guillermo and everybody that's worked on this so hard. Thank you all. And we look forward to working with you and Mexico, all of you and Mexico going forward to make North America the most competitive region in the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. See you soon.